I'm excited to hear more from him, and I look forward to sharing this evening with you. With that, I'll hand it over to Edwin.
All right. Thank you all for coming out. Can you hear me? All right, perfect. I believe the first order of business for me is to celebrate Shims as our Evoke scholar for Real Matter. She's a former student of mine, so I'm attached in that regard, and she's very talented, and I just want to celebrate you for the fellow, for being the Evoke fellow for Real Matter. So thank you very much, and congratulations. Was there another order of business I thought I was supposed to handle? I want to make sure I'm good to go on that front. I do have another order of business before I start, and I will go ahead and say this really quickly. I want to be as respectful of your time as possible, so I will warn you now I have way too many slides, but I will get through them, and I will make sure that they are not too long. The other thing I will say is, it may get a little preachy. I am the grandson of a preacher, so it's his fault. It's not mine, but I will do the best I can. And I want to, again, we can start the presentation from here. Let me make sure I plug in. All right, so the title and the lecture is Space Power. And you'll find more about space power as we move forward, but the first tenet and the first kind of thing that I want to kind of speak to is the idea of people matter. And so we very much believe in this. We are very much, me and my partners are very much kind of committed to the idea that design really can change the world for the better. And so we really believe that we are convicted by this. And so that's something that I want to make sure that will be underscored throughout the course of the talk that we get tonight. My business partners, Terry and Billy, are not here, but they are critical to everything that we do. And so I want to make sure that they're acknowledged. They are really powerful and dynamic in everything that they do and what they contribute. And so I'm really thankful to have them as partners. When we first set off, and I want to make sure that I kind of acknowledge, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Phil Freeline. He meant a lot to me. He was a mentor and gave me a lot of opportunities to really create a lot of, designs that were really important, that they really impacted me as well. And so the opportunity to be able to contribute in a meaningful way on these projects was something that really meant the world to me and forever impacted the way we began to start our practice. And so when we started our practice, we knew it was going to be more than about us. It couldn't just be about us, and it couldn't just be about making cool buildings. We really wanted to really impact folks who are looking to be designers, who even had no idea that design existed, or who could be potential patrons, policymakers, and to help them understand the power of design. So bringing students into our office is something that we do on a regular basis, whether they're pre-K or high schoolers, middle schoolers. Our goal is to really give back in a meaningful way that we feel makes an impact. And so that's something that we're really proud that we have the agency and the ability to do. It's not something that we do for a show. It's something that means something to us. I can't talk about my team enough. We have a great, amazing staff who challenge me and inspire me every day. And so I want to make sure that I acknowledge them as well. So we have grown. We opened in 2017, and so it was just the three of us, and now we're roughly 23 people. And so that's been quite the adjustment, but it's one that is indicative of the success and the belief that people have had in us, and so we're really thankful for that. So the talk is about space power, and space power is this kind of idea that in order for a project to be truly successful, it should have these certain components to make it a powerful space that really can improve the lives of people. And so I have these kind of 6 tenets that we use to kind of evaluate the projects in our office. And ideally, every project comprises and does all 6 of these elements really well, right? And if you do it really well, then we believe you've created a successful and powerful space. And so eternal optimism, authenticity and community, context and specificity, catalyst for innovation, access, agency, and opportunity, intentionality, or intentionally expressive rather, and courage. And so the idea of being intentionally expressive and courageous is something that I'll expound on as we move forward. Eternal optimism, for me, and I think this is really important, right? It is really kind of the core of what we do. We have to be optimistic. As designers, we feel that it's our job to see more than what everyone else sees. And so I will say this is, again, not to get too preachy, but resigning yourself to being just good enough, that's not enough for the work that we do. And I think we all have to challenge ourselves to understand that. And so with optimism, you have to find this sense of joy. And so the idea of bringing joy to your life and bringing joy to the work that you do is something that we like to think about, and we try to find that even when it gets hard and you're working with, challenging budgets, clients, deadlines, all the above, policymakers, how do you find that joy and how do you remain optimistic to continue to fight when things get difficult? Authenticity and community. I think the truest thing that we can do is try to find a true authenticity in who we're building for. It's not, again, about just a cool building, but making sure that the spaces are true to the character of the people that we're building for and their aspirations. When that happens, that's where you find the authenticity, and ultimately, that's where the success lies, and that's what causes the investment from community members into the spaces that you're building. Context and specificity. I think we all know about context and why it's important to be contextually kind of responsive, not necessarily blending in, but being responsive to and understanding where you're building is incredibly important. And I know there's different ways of kind of speaking to context. For us, it means, and I tell people in the office a lot, if you can take one of our buildings and pick it up and put it somewhere else and it works perfectly, then we haven't done our job, because I want our projects to be very specific to who we're building for and where we're building it. So we believe in that, and that's something that we subscribe to as a practice. Catalyst for innovation. I think good architecture is innovative in various ways, and it has to challenge the status quo. It's really about, again, how do you improve the lives of who you're designing for, and how do you kind of create that spark to kind of move society and propel people forward. And so that's our goal, is to use the built work that we do to create that spark, to inspire people to want to do more and to build upon what we've been able to establish. Access and agency and opportunity. Again, democratizing access, I think, is something that we think is important. Most of the work that we do is public. Roughly 90% of the work that we do is public. And so the idea of providing access, I think, is incredibly important, because we believe that that access gives everyone an opportunity to thrive. And so the idea of prosperity and promoting prosperity for everyone, and everyone having that opportunity for prosperity, is something that we believe that we can do through the architecture that we create. Being intentionally expressive and courageous. I think it takes courage to be expressive. I think it's very hard to put yourself out there in terms of what the intentionality is, in terms of the expression, where people can start to judge whether or not they like the aesthetic or not. And so for us, it's not necessarily about us creating and putting out an aesthetic. It's really us listening to our clients and listening to the communities that we're working with, and trying to express their goals and their ideals through the architecture that is created. So it's not about our values, it's us helping the architecture reflect their values through the built work, because these are huge investments in terms of the built environment, the money that's put forward. More often than not, the clients that we're building for, this is the only time they're building their building. So they have one time to get it right, and we want to make sure that their ideals are expressed in the architecture. So with that, I'll go ahead and start and show you some of the projects. I have 10 projects that I'm going to show today. Again, you can speak to them relative to, you can judge them relative to the tenants that we've talked about, and then we can go from there. But this project is really important to me personally because it's our first project as a practice. And so this is in Oxford, my hometown, and this is the Mary Potter School. And the Mary Potter School was a school that started in the late 1800s, and it was for African Americans because this was the only school that was available to them up until the mid-1970s actually. And so this campus was originally 165 acres, and all the buildings on the campus were built by the students, which is something that we thought was really cool. Right now, only 3 of the buildings still remain. And so some of the alumni who are still alive and very proud of their work or their school reached out to us and asked us if we could do something to help revive the 3 buildings that remain. And so this project is still going. So it started in 2017. It was kind of the little engine that could. And they've been able to get grants and get money to really create something that's powerful and dynamic. So this is now a conference center that still kind of tells the story of some of the elements and the legacy of the school. So again, it's under construction now, and this is one that, again, holds a special place in our heart because of the groundswell of support we were able to get from the town, but also from the National Park Service. We've gotten some civil rights grants. A lot of things happen from just a very small kind of project. Again, I tell people some of the people I've talked to, this was $20,000. This is the only project we had in the office. We signed a 3-year lease with a $20,000 project, and that was all we had, which was not the smartest thing in the world to do, but it worked out. But we were able to get that belief from not only the client, but also from other kind of entities. The next project is the North Carolina Central Television Studio. And so this one I do think is very appropriate relative to access and opportunity. North Carolina Central is a HBCU. The vast majority of their students to this day are still first-generation college students that come into the campus. And so when they first approached us, they had a television studio that needed to be renovated in the upper left-hand corner, and no one knew that this was the television studio. And so what they wanted to do was basically change out the equipment to create, to provide some kind of more up-to-date stuff, because they didn't have HD cameras or HD anything. It was all still standard TV. Everything was still analog. And we challenged them a little bit and said, look, we actually think you should do more than this, right? Like, we could make this a real studio, put it on display, and actually help it extend out and bring awareness to your program, because this is in their mass communications building. And so we wanted to bring awareness to the program and actually teach and train students how to actually work in professional environments in a way that allows them, before they even graduate, they can still hit the road and actually get jobs in meaningful media centers. And so the way we did that, we really just flipped the way the original studio was and then kind of turned it inside out. And it worked really well. We also were being a little bit more efficient with the way they used the actual studio space. We allowed it to be able to be flexible and adaptable for multiple kind of shot blocking, whether it was for news or whether it was for panel discussions, green screen, so on and so forth. And so this is one of the kind of setups for the news and teaching. Panel discussions, also green screen. Control room, so on the left is the original control room. Here, kind of increasing transparency, updating it, and then just kind of really being thoughtful about the shroud that we created within this. So one of the ideas behind this was they're very proud of their kind of the Eagle Pride and the legacy of that. And so we wanted to kind of think about, and I'll go back to this real quick, this kind of surround here, which was the light box. we wanted to not be hokey, but we wanted to create something that was kind of eagle wings that kind of spread. And so that was the metaphor that we used for that. And so this was the original day one we were actually walked through the space, and this is that same space. The next project is a sculpture that I did with James Utley. He's a good friend of mine, and this is in Charlotte. This is uptown Charlotte, West End, right across the street from Johnson C. Smith. And so West End is changing quite a bit in terms of gentrification for a myriad of reasons. The neighborhood is changing. The Arts Council wanted us to create something that commemorated the essence of 5 Points and celebrated the legacy of it. The lady in the upper right-hand corner is Dorothy Count-Scoggin. She is the first person to integrate Mecklenburg County Schools. And so she's still living, and we met with her. We had a lot of engagement sessions with her, and really just trying to understand and immerse ourselves in the neighborhood and the history of the neighborhood, and understanding why things were the way they were, and then what were the stories that no one else would know. And so we had multiple engagement sessions about this, and so we learned about the churches. We learned about kind of how all these churches kind of started to create these moments and had these kind of group sessions or group kind of pairings with other churches to start to like fundraise for different initiatives that happen within the neighborhood before integration. And so in the upper left-hand corner, these are some of the engagement sessions that we had. One of the ladies in this picture, she was 97 at the time, and she shared with us so many stories that were just truly inspiring. And so with this sculpture here, you can see we were able to kind of infuse some of the imagery from West End and then reinterpret it. So this is Dorothy Count-Scoggin on the day that she integrated the school to create, again, memory, because we know that the neighborhood is changing, but we want to make sure that people understand what was. And so that was our goal with the sculpture that we created. And then this is, I don't expect you to read any of this, but this was Ms. Scoggins. She was basically telling us how proud she was of what we were able to create and how well she thought it did in terms of interpreting what was and celebrating what was so that people in the future would remember it. And so that meant a lot to me to get this note from her. And so I wanted to make sure I showed that, because that is part of the reason why we do what we do. This project is just finishing up. This is also at North Carolina Central, and this is the 24/7 Collaborative Learning and Research Center. That's the full name. And what it is really a touchdown for graduate students who are coming to campus to be able to have a place to basically collaborate throughout their space. And so what's interesting about this project is this was really meant to be a threshold moment for the university. It's at the intersection of Lawson Street and Fayetteville Street. And then from there, downtown is actually toward the northwest. And so it also bridges what is college and what is single family residences. And so how do you negotiate that scale? I think that's something that is incredibly important. And so what we wanted to do was figure out ways in which we would be able to do something like that. And so one of the things that we started looking at was the front porch. And when we first started working on this project, it was actually during the pandemic. And so this is like height of the pandemic, and everyone was really afraid of going inside. And so one of the kind of goals for this project was to basically allow for most of the events to happen outside. And so the idea of the big porch was really something that they appreciated. They also appreciated using the porch to modulate the scale from the other single family residence to the right, and then start to scale up as you move into the rest of the campus. The building itself is fairly straightforward. It's very simple. It's essentially a box that's been kind of stretched. There's a lounge space, a large lounge space, and then there's group study space surrounding that area. One of the things that was also interesting about this site was that there was a house that sat on this site previously, and it was torn down maybe 10 years ago, and it was for Alex Rivera. He was the photographer for North Carolina Central for years. And so he had a rich history in himself, telling the story of North Carolina Central and getting the word out to people about the great things that were going on in North Carolina Central's campus. The thing that we did not realize until we did a little bit more research was his father-in-law actually lived in this house before that, Alonzo Edwards. Alonzo Edwards happens to be the first licensed architect, black architect in North Carolina. And that was really cool to us. And so we talked to the university and asked them, could we do a mural to reinterpret this and tell this story in the building? And they were all about it. And so being able to do that, again, we kind of are trying to discover what's happening, what's meaningful, and really imbue that meaning back into the projects that we do. It's just a section through it. This is one of the views. And this is another view. Mary Lou. So the next project is at Duke University. This is the Mary Lou Williams Center for Black Culture. And we were contacted about this project because there was a flood. So this project is literally the result of basically some sprinkler pipes, and Verche actually worked on this project. And so she was very much involved in this project as well, relative to the sprinkler damage, and it really just ruined the entire interior of the space. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, this was an opportunity to really think about what the Mary Lou Center was, because what was there before wasn't necessarily telling the story that they wanted to speak to, and they wanted to speak to the African diaspora and what this meant. And so one of the things that we started to look at from a conceptual standpoint was we were very much inspired by the Gullah Geechee people, and kind of thinking about the idea of hate and using this space as a space to kind of help ward off the kind of the bad spirits and kind of be this home for the African Americans, or the black students rather, at the university. And so we were inspired by this idea of the drum, and also these Ndinkra symbols that we kind of interpreted. So this is not quite Ndinkra, but we were inspired by it, and we wanted to kind of use these types of symbolism within the space. It's a very small space, but we wanted to be very specific and very kind of efficient with the space that we had. And then looking out that window is actually the quad to the Duke Chapel. And you kind of see the drum element conceptually. And then the next project, which was spoken about earlier, is Hayti Reborn. Hayti Reborn is the product of Dr. Henry McCoy reaching out to us about this project because he has lived in Hayti. And anyone who knows the story of Hayti, it's a big scar for the city of Durham, and it's something that, quite frankly, needs to be rectified in a meaningful way. And so this is roughly, this is not all of Hayti. This is just the Fayette Place housing site. And so there's a rich history of Hayti that I don't have enough time to really go into, but I will say this site was a 20-acre site that was, after urban renewal and after the Durham Freeway came in, was raised. All the single-family houses were raised from this site, and then a housing project was put in its place. And so you can see this is a 20-acre site, and right now, to this day, you see the existing foundations of the housing projects. And so one of the charges that we were talked to about was, how do we create something that's more powerful than just replacing a housing project with another form of housing project, quite frankly. And so we looked at doing something that was more powerful, so something that was a research institute that also had housing but also had farming, and a sustainability kind of a sustainable forward complex. And so this was one of the transformations that we were looking to do. And so as we started to think about programming and phasing, ultimately we were inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Mary Bethune, and George Washington Carver, kind of the idea of blending the intellect with the hand in educating and also research. And so how do you create this element that kind of combines the best of all these things? Because the reality, to solve the challenges of our planet, we need the hand, we need the intellect, we need to educate and empower, we also need the research. All these things are equally as important. And so that was something that we really wanted to push relative to this project. And so a lot of green initiatives, even kind of suggesting a people mover be part of this, as opposed to trying to remove the car from this whole complex. And so Durham Public Schools, Murray Massenburg. So this is actually the first K through 12 building I've ever done in my life. And, you know, one of the things that I think we are proud of is we don't always have the experience. We haven't done 50 of anything. And we think that's actually a good thing. We think the idea of being able to come in and kind of look at things with fresh eyes is important, because it helps us eliminate some of the blind spots of someone who has done 50 of anything. The site for this is really tricky, but the client was really ambitious and willing to try something new, because essentially they had a real need. So this is roughly 33 acres of a site. And this is supposed to fit 900 students. So it's a core capacity of 900 students. And so one of the challenges with this site was, again, very rocky, lots of grade change, roughly 70 feet of grade change on this site. And then also for a elementary school, this is the antithesis of what typical elementary schools are. Most of them are one level, and you really want to make it one level, flatten the site, move on with your life. But we couldn't do that for this. And so, which was an opportunity for us. There's also a stream buffer that runs toward the right side of this. And so in the upper right-hand corner, you can start to see the diagram for the site is very much, we wanted to use the topography to our advantage. And so we were able to do that. We introduced also a kind of a bridge that allowed for that to happen. I think the other notion of this, and before I move to the next slide, is we wanted to create equal access. And so the north of the site is actually the bus loop, and the south of the site is actually the car drop-off. And one of the things that was really important to Durham Public Schools is that the car riders and the bus riders come into the school in the same way. And so they all come through the front door, and we were able to do that because that was something that they told us very early that was important to them. And believe it or not, it is important. When you start to see the school work and function, you understand why that's important. And so the floor plan is fairly simple, but we did create a courtyard primarily because, again, this is a 135,000 square foot building, very large building for elementary school, and making sure that it did not feel overwhelming to the students was something that was important. So breaking it down into a courtyard, reducing the length of the corridor was something that made a lot of sense and we thought was important, and then it also allowed us to daylight to the beautiful site. So we were able to really keep a lot of the site elements on the site. In terms of a lot of the trees, I want to say we only disturbed right at 45% of the site, and the rest of the site we were able to keep untouched. And this is one of the main stairs. This is stair A. There's a commons right up top. And so what we did from a wayfinding standpoint is everywhere you see kind of this gold color is where the public spaces are. And so there's commons and public spaces that happen here. You can see kind of the connection on the image to the left is actually the cafeteria, gymnasium, there's a bridge element, and then the courtyard element here. This section I think is very important to really understand. The media center and the arts and music happens in the bridge, and then underneath the bridge is actually an outdoor play area, a covered outdoor play area. And so you can start to see this in this section. So you can really see how the playground starts to take advantage of the section, and you can start to see the transformation from there. And this is a view looking back through the playground back toward the building. And then along the bridge, you can start to see, again, outdoor commons, outdoor kind of learning space, Then along the bridge, you can start to see different elements, and then the media center is off to the right. And this is another view of the media center, some of the other commons areas. The outdoor eating areas as well. And then we had a vegetated roof, which again, I think is really spills out from the A Commons, so you can really see it. Everyone gets to see it and kind of enjoy it as well. Another project that was also kind of interesting is this Harvard Medical School building, which is Gordon Hall. This building was built in 1906, Beaux-Arts style. And it's a renovation, and it's another community, which is kind of funny to speak to community relative to the medical school. But what's interesting about this project is ultimately a lot of universities are having issues with office space, and so office space for faculty members and admin. And one of the concerns is they're running out of space. How do you start to allow for people to work, hybrid workers, work remotely, and then how do you consolidate the offices? And so without doing full-on hoteling, they wanted to turn this into a flex hybrid kind of working space. And so roughly 400 people will occupy these 3 floors at any given time with a kind of a phased element. So there's essentially office space that starts to happen. The history of the building is really interesting. This was actually a medical museum. And so in its early history, it was a medical museum with basically a bunch of daylight. And over the course of time, the skylight got covered in, a lot of the walls got put up, and it got transformed to just a very segmented office space. And so what we did was we looked at different ways of, different postures of learning, different postures of working, and tried to provide those different elements within this space. And so we also, from an architectural standpoint, we started to peel back as much of the kind of the non-essential architecture and to reveal the kind of the bones of the building, to allow the building to tell the story itself and allow people to have access, equal access to the daylight within the space. And so this section starts to kind of tell that story as well in terms of the grand kind of atrium space is actually on the 3rd level. And then as the 3rd level is kind of the noisiest, and then as you move up to the upper levels, the spaces become a little bit more quieter, so it's more individual spaces. But the idea, again, is that there's these different communities and different neighborhoods for people to work how they work best within this space. And then this is just kind of the idea of removing the walls, but also using these kind of cloud elements to start to define space and neighborhoods was something that we were able to leverage. It also allowed us to tuck a lot of the HVAC that you didn't want to see, even though we have a lot that's exposed, but we were trying to tuck as much as we could under these. So the next project is in Raleigh, and this is something that's active right now. We just had a call earlier, Vishay and I just had a call on this, and this is the John Chavis Memorial Park Aquatic Center. And this is something, again, that we're very proud of. Vishay, we're ending design development. Is that correct? Yes, exactly. So we're ending design development. We've all are moving forward with, trying to, again, make this more real. And so we're really excited about where this is moving. So ultimately, those of you who know the history of Chavis Park knows that it's a rich legacy. And the pool is also, the original pool was a pool that everyone went to and meant a lot to the blacks, and not only in Raleigh, but also in the region. This was really a true destination for everyone. And so really calling attention to that was something that was really important. The existing, or the original carousel house that was to the north of the site was also another draw to the park as well. And so one of the inspirations for us was this idea of the kind of various kind of elliptical circular shapes, even the track area throughout the throughout the park, we're starting to kind of create these moments and these linkages. And then as we start to think about the carousel house, we were also inspired by this idea of a crown. And so we wanted to create this crown element for the park to really, again, mark the southern part of the site, but also become this jewel within the park. And so the idea is that it's not an aquatic center that happens to have a park around it. It's actually a park that happens to have an aquatic center within it. And so we wanted to make sure that it's a large building, but we wanted to make sure that it sat in the site, but it still had the right amount of presence to celebrate the legacy and kind of embody the legacy of Chavis Park. So this is a few model shots. The plan is fairly straightforward as you enter in from kind of the southern part of this page as you move in from the lobby area and then the actual pool. So we have, indoor pools as well as outdoor pools as well. And you can start to see the cross section. And this is in the lobby as you check in, looking through the lobby into the indoor pool area. Another cross section through it. And you can start to see how we're trying to leverage the daylighting to try to reduce the glare. So we also have the crown that's doing double duty, is doing an aesthetic appeal in terms of establishing that presence and that intentional expressiveness, but it's also helping to reduce glare and heat gain off the pool as well. And then also the clear stories kind of bringing in that natural light. And then the last project I'll show is actually the Tubman Center, and this is very much in design. So this is very kind of raw. So everything I'm showing right now is in process, but I think it's important to kind of show even how the process starts to work. So this is a project in Seattle, Washington, and one of the things that's interesting about this project is it is meant for helping improve the outcomes of African Americans and indigenous peoples, the health outcomes. And so what the client did not want to call this was a clinic or a hospital. We have no experience doing any kind of health care at all. And they were like, that's perfect. We don't want that. And so when we spoke with them, one of the things that we talked about was creating a space that was welcoming, that people felt welcome and felt like they could be there, a place that helped to promote self-care and help people and help communities actually kind of take care of each other. Again, a place of joy. That's something that we think about all the time. How do you find that joy even when things are challenging? We talk about generational wealth all the time, but health is wealth. And so generational health was something that we talked to them about. How do we start to promote that? And so as we started thinking about some of the spaces that were required within the space, we looked at kind of the idea of interconnectedness of programming of spaces. So I don't expect you to kind of understand all the diagrams, but the idea is that we're trying to kind of promote that, and we understand the reliances of each programmatic element that's contingent and relying on other elements. And so this is actually in Rainier Beach, which is kind of the southern part of Seattle. And this is a historically black area of town. It's also the most diverse zip code in the country, I believe. So the most languages are actually spoken in this zip code, which is pretty interesting. A lot of grade change on the site, significant grade change, and also right next to a light rail, and then also we have the kind of the power line park I can't remember the name of, but our site is really at a interesting intersection with a lot of just amazing grade change, but we've been working to kind of create that. And so one of the things that we looked at early on was, again, this is named after Harriet Tubman, but what about Harriet Tubman are we inspired by? And so there's so many things that we can be inspired by, that we are informed by, but one of the things I started to latch on to was her shawl, and what does that shawl kind of represent? The shawl really represented to me protection, but also covering, but also could be opened up to welcome you in. And we started to look at what that meant relative to a kind of more the courtyard, being able to bring nature in and bring kind of daylight. If you know about Seattle, you know it's gray a lot. And so how do you start to kind of bring it in as much as you can? When we were starting to do our research, we started to see some kind of parallels, right? So the healers from West Africa, but also from some of the indigenous Coast Salish tribes and other tribes, they all kind of had this kind of shawl covering, which was a weird coincidence, but at the same time, it let us know that we were on the right track. And so we were very much inspired by what that meant and how we could start to interpret these symbols. And so we started looking at all the symbolism, and we started kind of finding some kind of commonalities in terms of how we start to kind of use this to express the skin. And so, again, early concept renderings, but starting to think about using a simple kind of economic skin, and then how do we start to interpret it to kind of translate the symbolism, the meaningful symbolism into the project. And so you actually enter in as the shawl kind of lifts up in certain places, again, trying to provide protection, but also welcomeness and kind of openness all at the same time. A view in the lobby. And then this is another view as well. So again, very early on in process, but I wanted to make sure I showed you kind of how the projects are proceeding. We're really excited about where this is headed. And so we'll see where that goes from there. Again, the shawl is really important. Shawl conceptually, it brings its way also inside in terms of a way of thinking for folks who have been disenfranchised with the healthcare system, and how do you start to improve their outcomes. And again, generational health is wealth. So the last slide I have is really about place power. So I talked about space power. Place power is different in the sense that as architects, we really don't have control over place. We do have control over spaces. So we can inform the spaces, but I would submit that the people and the communities over time and the generations are those who actually create places. And so our goal is to create spaces that empower people to make place. And so that's ultimately how we move, how we practice. Before I go, again, I told you I had an amazing team. I want to make sure I call the names of my team members: Peter, Matthew, Angie, Mark, Jack, Dave, Brittany, Angel, Steve, Valerie, Jason, Brichet, Christina, Meredith, Tyler, OG, Samantha, Caitlin, Katie, Stella, Parker. You all are amazing. We could not do the work we do without them. And so I want to make sure that we call attention to not just me, but to them, because they are incredible. And that's it, space power. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk tonight. This was very inspiring. We're going to open up for Q&A, so please raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you. Oh, that was easy.
Edwin, this is the first time I've looked at the work you all have done beyond what you've done with Chavis, and that was amazing. What I really just wanted to say was how much I appreciate the in-depth work that you all put into finding out the history of the place and the history and how it should wrap around what's being built, instead of just taking what the norm is to do it. And I think that's important in terms of your team's care for the clients in the communities that they work in. And I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Good evening. It's another amazing day in paradise. Thank you so much for this presentation. One of the things that excites me about your presentation is the presence of children in it so much. And I'm a wannabe architect. I've said that before, but my superhero name is Mama Kai because I found my superpowers being the mom and student of a young black male superhero. So I have the best career, even though y'all do a pretty good, cool job. I have kind of like an invitation and a question, because right now my main goal is to see Raleigh win one of 10 All-American City Awards next year. It was an invitation that was given to us, kind of a challenge by the Deputy Director of the National Civic League back in March. And so that's an invitation because we haven't won it. Raleigh hasn't won it since 1975. Durham actually hasn't won it since 1983. So I'm thinking, maybe our cities can be 2 of the 10. Because I think this year North Carolina took home 4 or 5 of them. But my question is, if there was something that you could design that was child-centric, yet adult-friendly, because a lot of times we build spaces that are mostly for children, but not always interactive enough for adults and children. So if there was something that you could design with children in mind, but would invite people of all ages, even people who didn't have children, what do you think it would be? What would it look like?
I mean, I think the Aquatic Center at John Chavis is a perfect example of that, because, I mean, the reality is anything within a park is very egalitarian, right? You don't even have to be there for a reason, but you're there. And so I think the Aquatic Center is really important. One, I think being able to swim, everyone learning how to swim is important. One, we know that historically we worked on a lot of projects where, this was the only pool for African Americans, so on and so forth. But I think even being multi-generational, not just kind of adults and children, but also seniors as well, right? Being able to have a true cross-section represented in the work that we do and the visitorship and the patronage of the projects, I do think that the Aquatic Center is actually really helpful for that, because, again, having people there for water aerobics, therapy, people learning how to swim, or people just there to do competitions, any of those things, and being able to have that confluence of people coming together, I think is really important, and that really speaks to the whole idea of community. And so to your point, I'm glad you asked that question, is like, as you start to think about different program types, how do you bring people together? Because everyone has these different perspectives, and if you can start to create these kind of happy collisions where people can start to really kind of appreciate other kind of perspectives, I think that's really important, and that makes our world better.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciated you saying just having a deep understanding of the context and the history of a culture, a community, a space to help identify sort of the intention of the design. And I was curious what other tools you and your team work to really take the intangible and turn it into something physical. Specifically when you're working with this within this thing of identity.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and something that I'm glad you asked, because I don't want us to be, and I don't want it to be misconstrued that we are completely reliant on just doing research in history. There's also data that we start to look at in terms of current data, and then also just, quite frankly, going and talk to people, like actual kind of in-person intercepts. Most of the work that we're doing, again, is community focused, and one of the things that you're kind of thinking about when you're doing community work is how do you create any kind of consensus? The reality is you don't always create this consensus, but what you want to do and what we try to do is establish trust. And so we establish trust through investment, and our goal is to basically show whoever we're building for that we're invested in their success, and we're invested in doing things to improve their lives. And so it's not always through historical research, it's not always through data. Sometimes it's a conversation, and also more often than not, it takes time. So that investment of time throughout, not just worrying about kind of billable hours, but being there consistently, I think is really important. And so we're convicted. Like I don't know how else to say it other than we are very, like, we believe everything we say. Like, this is not, it's a presentation, but it's not just a presentation. Like, we're very convicted about this. And, like, this process is consistent on every project, whether it's a sculpture, an office building, a school. It is very consistent because we believe this is what makes the project successful, and we believe that this is what allows people to realize that we're taking them seriously and that they're being heard. And so by doing that, and I'll shut up real quick, but by doing that, if we're able to do that, we're able to galvanize. And so even if they don't necessarily like, we do a crown of an element, they may not like it, but they understand that we did it for a reason. They understand the why behind it, and they start to appreciate it. And so that's the kind of the buy-in that we try to get. Yep.
So I always tell you I'm the biggest fan of Evoke. I'm your number one fan. Your firm is relatively young, but it's grown exponentially. I mean, like it's remarkable the amount of work and the scale of work that you've done, and your process is really what drives that. And it's something that needs to be shared and something that other architects need to emulate. So my question is, how do you plan to share Evoke with everyone else, one, and then what is Evoke's future, 10 years from now?
All right, that's a whole lot, but I'll start. And I appreciate all of it, and you're very funny. But one, I did look at the kind of where are we going, or are we there yet? Is that, I can't remember. Did I get the where are we going? Are we there yet? There we go. Are we there yet? So the are we there yet? Which is really crazy because, again, we opened in earnest in 2017. We started in 2016, but opened in earnest in 2017. And you're right, the kind of work that we have and where our practice has gotten is really kind of, it's beyond my wildest imagination, quite frankly. And I'm really grateful for it. And I think right now we're just getting to the point of kind of proof of concept. So these tenants we've always believed in them, and we were able to get some clients who actually started to buy into it as well on blind faith. But now that we have these things actually out and tangible for people to see, now they start to believe it, right? For me, this is the time to press the gas, right? And this is the time, once you're there, now you have to say, okay, well, we did it here. We can do more. We can do more. We can do it better. That doesn't mean getting bigger. That means expanding reach. And so, I think for us, we want to expand our reach. And we don't have a building type, a targeted market area or anything like that. It's the right project that we think has the right impact. And so that's something, again, we've been very intentional about, making sure that the projects that we pursue or the projects that we agree to do are projects that are in alignment with the goals that we set forth from the very beginning. Does it make and improve society? Is this something that we'd be proud of 50 years from now, someone coming back and saying, why did they do that, right? Because we don't necessarily get it right all the time, but we want people to see that we actually tried. And so are we there yet, and where are we going? We're going to press the gas, and we're going to keep being ambitious about what we believe design can do. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Edwin, thanks for coming out tonight. I want to touch on point one, which was kind of always searching for optimism. With the student projects this year, one of the charges we presented them with was making sure any proposal, what if proposal for our city was life-giving, rejecting cynicism. And so I would equate that to searching for optimism. And I wondered if you could kind of unpack that a little bit as a idea for your office.
I think that's the reason why I said it was the most important for the office, is because it is so easy to be bogged down by the challenges of reality, right? And so there's so many reasons why you don't do something, or why you can't do something, or why you shouldn't do something. But then if you have to flip your mindset and say, why should I do it? And why can't I do it? And so even going back to the earlier question is now we are asking, like, even before when we said we haven't done 50 of these things, we come into it and ask, why can't we do it? And so I think the first thing is, okay, what is the goal for the project? And what is your goal for kind of, again, improving society? If your goal is to truly improve society, which I hope your goal is if you're a designer, then, okay, what are the things that we believe would improve it? And then you say, okay, step one, how do I get there? What's the kind of the overall mission? And once you set that goal, at least for me, setting that goal allows that to be your North Star. And if that's your North Star, everything that you do and every decision you make from a design standpoint should be rooted around and guided by, does this actually do the goal that you want it to do? And so particularly with the projects that you're looking for, I would go ahead and try to find, or that you're working on, I would definitely go and come up with the crazy idea. I know it sounds cliche, but like come up with the most ridiculous idea that you think would make for an amazing place and why. And then do the research on why that happens. Suspend your disbelief for a while. I think we do that in the office a lot. And, you know, our engineers and our cost estimators definitely don't like that. But I think the reality is you have to, because if you go ahead and relegate yourself to, well, the budget is this column grid can't be more than 24 feet on center or 30 feet, like, you can't do that because you've already defeated yourself from that point on. So for us, we have to kind of suspend our disbelief for a little bit before we move forward into reality, because we will get to reality because they will make sure you get to reality, right? So let us, you know, not defeat ourselves.
Thank you. I had a question regarding your work at John Chavis Memorial, the center. You shared a sentiment that it's not just a park, it's a destination. So I wanted to hear more about how, while you did the center, how did you get people to come to the park, and how did you use the site to deliver to other people in the area?
So could you repeat that? I just want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah, basically, how did you get this project outreach to people in the area and Greater Raleigh as a general? Okay,
so this was a public project, and one of the things, again, John Chavis Park has a tremendous legacy, and that neighborhood is a powerful neighborhood that this means everything to that neighborhood. And so I think this has been in the makings for decades. So this is, you know, we were a part of the project, we got selected, but even before this, John Chavis Park has always had kind of a groundswell of community members who have been pushing to say something positive needs to happen here, because a lot of bad things happened that were taken away from, even when the park was kind of first started, it did not get the same support as other parks in the city. And so from when we were selected, the city had in place some engagement sessions, community engagement sessions, and they actually, for this one, they actually engaged another community engagement partner, but we were a part of every engagement session. And Rashay can speak to the specific number. She's actually the project manager for that project. Jack in as well. But the idea was we wanted, again, to be there. We wanted to be present. So even if the city doesn't have engagement, we are always going to have an engagement, because we understand, again, that engagement establishes trust with the community, but also it informs us. It very much informs us about what's the right thing to do for that community and how to respond to the community. So that was really how we started that process. And so it wasn't just us. We were, again, part of that community as well. Did that answer, or is there any another part of the question?
No, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
You have a lot of projects that are communities for communities of color. So when you started your practice, was it that you had this vision from the beginning that you wanted to work for the communities, and You did answer in the previous question that you now choose also projects that align with your vision, but was it there from the beginning, or the right projects came in and now it grew into the practice that is so community focused?
I'm glad you asked that question. So I tell people all the time, you finish how you start. So it was very intentional. So when we started the firm, we knew the types of projects we wanted to do. We weren't going to be limited by projects. And again, we have a pretty large reach. And so I only was able to show 10 projects, but there's a lot of other projects in the office that do different things. But we are very intentional about the work that we pursue. We're very intentional about the work that we say yes to and say no to. When we first started, again, we had $20,000. That was it. And we had rent, and the rent was due, and there was bills that still had to be paid. It takes courage and blind naivete, quite frankly, to be able to say no when the bills need to be paid. And so we still said no, even early on, when it was just the three of us, to certain projects that quite frankly would have paid the bills. But we had to be very intentional about what we wanted to be. And so I don't necessarily suggest saying no to everything, but I do suggest, again, the same thing with the question that Zach asked about kind of the optimism. What is your North Star? Figure out what your North Star is and make sure you're being true to that. And so for us, even when we were early on, we knew what projects we wanted to do, and we knew what projects were important to us. And so, again, we picked which projects to pursue. We pursued a whole lot of projects. We heard a whole lot of no's. I will make sure I tell you that. But the ones that started to say yes and then started to kind of build that momentum to create more. And then it's like I tell people sometimes, you don't want to be like, I like Harry Potter. So I watch Harry Potter sometimes, and I'm a fan, right? Daniel Radcliffe can be any movie and wherever. He's always going to be Harry Potter to me. The same thing happens with the types of firms that you are, right? If you've done certain work, you want to make sure it's very hard to kind of escape that gravity of the work that you do. And so for us, if people are going to typecast us, I'd much rather be typecast as someone who's looking to do community-focused work. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, Edwin, thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause to Edwin. I also want to recognize the students who just had a schematic review today. So if you don't mind standing up, and you all give another round of applause for all the students that have been working so hard this week. You got one more week to go. Keep it strong. I want to thank Arrowhead for sponsoring the lecture tonight. Also want to thank NSC Noma for sponsoring the reception. How's the Swank? I don't know if you're still here. Thank you so much for coming here and live printing. Mark Russell for the amazing food you had outside. Maybe more. Is he still out here? Well, I want to thank you for the amazing food you had tonight. And we're going to take a break for the weekend. We're going to come back on Monday with another lecture by Betsy Williamson. So I hope to see you all here. And the lecture is sponsored by Women in Architecture. I'm going to also have a reception earlier. So I hope to see you all. Have a great weekend and be safe out there.
Before Joel leaves the center of attention, it is Joel Freitas' birthday. He has been an incredible part of our office. And so I'm going to start us and sing on a microphone and start, but I need y'all to all join in. Happy birthday to you.
Where are you, Zach? Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.